Welcome, everyone, to the NDILC. Principle number 11, be accountable. It's going to be hosted by our first Lynette Keyowski, her very first session. Woo! Take it away, Lynette.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Desiree. This is such a privilege and an honor to be leading a conversation with all of you amazing women. I feel like I'm definitely the newbie, but I also feel like I'm a bit of the baby here. You have all had such amazing careers and so many amazing accomplishments that I'm honored to be here to learn from all of you, which is really what I hope we can do today. Is what I'd love to do is lead a conversation and genuinely have a conversation with all of you around this month's principle, which is being accountable to yourself, your community, and the planet. And you know, in thinking about setting up for this conversation and the fact that I don't yet know all of you, I thought what a great way to really get to know the nature of people is to sort of just, you know, ping into how they feel about accountability, because it's pervasive. And in setting up the call today, the little note that I sent all of you, I shared a link to an article, a Forbes article that I'd come across a while ago. And I think as leaders of organizations, leaders of people, often this question, whether we intentionally focus on it or not, pops up in terms of, well, who's accountable, right? Who's accountable for the overall, you know, financial or success or health of the organization? Who's accountable for the day-to-day operations? Who's accountable for the little minute decisions and things that happen throughout the day? And often I feel within our organizations, but even within larger society or our lives, that question sometimes resolves in this sort of notion of ickiness, right? Like, you know, where's blame being attributed, or who's at fault? And man, I'm going to be held accountable to this. So do I actually need to make an evaluation about my values right now? Do I act honestly and actually admit to the fact that, you know, I maybe made a decision? But it sort of resolves in this, you know, who is accountable? And I feel like that's a very external kind of way to view accountability. And so, you know, when thinking about this, of course, in the real estate sector, which is where I and Desiree, Sharron, Teresa all sort of resolve around in some way, it's been a bit of a big news week, but there's also been a big news week, I would say globally, right? Big news week, big news month, big news year. I mean, we've got a lot of really sort of foundational, fundamental things that are going on for which people are looking for someone to either take accountability or to hold accountable for certain things. And it made me really wonder two questions. One, you know, have we sort of, you know, what is the definition of accountability these days? What does accountability mean to people? And I wonder if it means the same to most people as it does to me. So I'd love to lean in there, first of all, today in the conversation, and sort of have each of you share what your view or your definition or sort of how you embody accountability, whatever that looks like in your world. And then secondly, I can't help but also look around and see so many great examples of where really accountability is working quite well and quite effectively. And so rather than focus on sort of that negative view of who are we going to hold accountable for some of these big things, I'd love to maybe dive into experiences or ways in which you are all seeing accountability at work in a really, really good, positive, productive way in your lives. So sort of with that as the large framework and umbrella, I'm happy to take volunteers, but I'd love to maybe just start with a level set of, you know, sort of for those of you on the call, what does accountability mean to you? Any takers?
I'll go. I think that.
Thank you, Tami.
From a business standpoint, I believe that accountability is living your mission statement. So whatever you decided to deliver, you need to live that mission statement. And I think that that's a really broad statement to say, but it's honestly living and honoring your mission statement. When we were on for a few minutes before this call, you could hear, you know, there are certain companies out there that we've witnessed that are talking out of both sides of their mouth. They say that people are most important, but they're really transactional leaders and money's more important. We've witnessed an awful lot of things in our industry as a whole of people behaving badly. And, you know, I hate to see that they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that it's really important that we recognize that there's also individuals that, you know, have done things. But I would say living your mission statement would be a business one. For me, as far as a human being goes and as an individual goes, it's honoring your commitments. And I think that that's probably the best description I could say on accountability. And that means honoring all your commitments. And do we honor the commitments to ourselves? Do we honor the commitments that we made to other people? Is there an easy way for us to make it an excuse and get out of it? Or do we really stick with it and honor those commitments that we made?
I love that, Tami. Thank you so much for first of all, volunteering to go first, but, you know, so also for making it very clear distinction. I think, I mean, obviously a lot of crossover there, but definitely some very distinct approaches in terms of a business and just, you know, general personal views. So thank you for that. Who's next? I'm happy to also just voluntold, but I'm happy to take volunteers.
I can share.
Thank you.
Whenever I hear the word accountability, I always laugh because this one moment in time always pops in my head when I was raising my son, and my son and my husband were just at this point where they were just butting heads all the time. Like they just were, you know, and I would just watch this going on and they were making each other crazy. And I sat down with my son and I said, I go, buddy, you know, everybody's got a button. Like everybody's got a button that when you push it, that the reaction is exponentially worse than what's really happening, because it's like one of the most important things to that person. And I said, what do you think your dad's button is? Like that thing that just sets him off. And he, without, you know, missing a beat, he said, appreciation. I go, you know it. I go, why the hell are you pushing it? You know? And so, you know, it was a reset for him where he got it. I go, well, what's my button? And my button's accountability, because I always felt like with anybody, we're all going to screw up. You know, there's no doubt about it. I mean, if we're not pushing the envelope a little bit and trying and, you know, pushing ourselves, there's just no chance that you're not going to make a mistake. But for me, it's all about owning it. Like there's nothing that sends me into orbit more than someone evading or not taking ownership or not being accountable for the mistake. So, you know, the kids always knew with me that if they came clean, it was going to be, you know, and with a solution. Like it's not just owning the mistake, but, you know, I get it. I screwed up. I see the problem. I'm not going to go down that road again. Or, you know, just it's accountability to me is that all ownership of, you know, and giving grace when people, you know, own it and are accountable. I mean, that's the other thing is you've got to make it safe to say, you know, when you do mess up, you know, okay, well, let's talk about it and let's put a solution to fix it too.
I love that. So the both the ownership and the proactivity, right? In terms of like, I call that making the audio meet the video, or the video meet the audio, right? And you know, that comes back to talking out of both sides of your mouth, right? Is what you're doing what you say you're going to do? I feel like that's, you know, such an important component of this conversation. I love it. Thank you for sharing the story, Marty. I mean, I love kids' stories. You all know that, you know, my kids, like all of yours, are near and dear to your heart. And they really do. Honestly, like I've said, and I'll say it over and over again, my kids are like my biggest teachers, right? They teach me a lot about myself, whether they think they do or don't. So I love it. Thank you. Teresa.
Yes, I'll go next. And one of the things that I was looking it up because I think it's really important too. And Tami and Marty, I'm going to share similar stories as you. I agree, your mission statement, Tami. And also, one of the things that we do at a company level that we do every single Monday is we have an integrity mantra that's based on accountability. And I actually live this, and I think it's really, so I'm going to say it. I hope that's okay. We pretty much have it memorized, but I wanted to make sure that I did it correctly. So integrity, nothing hidden, being truthful and honest, doing complete work, working from an empowering context, and doing very well what you do, doing it as it meant to be done or better and without cutting corners. In other words, honoring one's word, doing what you know to do, doing what you said you would do, and on time, doing what others could expect you to do, even if you haven't said you would do it, and saying when you are not doing this, as soon as you realize you won't be doing it or won't be doing it on time. So I think that is just phenomenal because it talks about accountability. And to also, like you were saying, Lynette, we all make mistakes, all of us, or we can't meet our deadlines. There are times where we've got projects that we've given our word that we're going to complete, but as soon as we know we are not able to complete it, we need to fess up to it. We need to say, hey, I'm not able to get this done. I'm accountable for what my actions and things, there's whirlwinds. We all come with whirlwinds, things that happen throughout the day. But I think from a company perspective, having that to us, that's our mantra. And I think it's really important one. And I think it's one that I agreed with Tami that just kind of follows. Marty, I'm going to share a story about my son that I'll never forget. He played football during his sophomore and junior year of high school. And they had held a party. They always have these events at, where all the kids get together. And one of the events was at a fun game, like a pool billiard fun place, like, bar, but it was not drinking. It was open to them to have fun. And the kids took the chalk off the pool, the pool table, that chalk that you use, and they spread it all over the place. I mean, it was a mess. And so the next day when we were at the coaches, at the football, when they were practicing, all the parents come to pick up their kids. And I was there to pick up Jeffrey along with a lot of other parents. And so it was their freshman year because they weren't driving yet. So so the coach asked, he said, we got a lot of complaints from the place that we had, that y'all made it a mess, that it was unbelievable. You trashed the place. And I want to know who's responsible for this. Who was the person that took the chalk and spread it all over the place? And of course, nobody would step up. And he's like, well, you're all going to have to run, regardless, you're all going to run, it's going to even be harder, blah, 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 on and on and on. And then again, all of a sudden, it's a silence. Now I'm going to give you one more chance. Who's going to step up? And Jeffrey stepped up. He pulled his foot and I know he didn't. I was there. He wasn't the initiator. But he stepped up and said, Coach, I was involved with that. And it was me. And then about 10 other kids did the same thing. And so I was just so proud and surprised that under that duress that he actually said, hey, we did it. We all did it together. I wasn't at first, but it messed up the place. And I certainly have to pay the consequences. I've never been prouder. So that accountability, I think, is something that a lot of us have to realize. It's built within us. And we just have to set the standards within our individuals, our companies. So obviously that was something that we had in him. And hey, if you do something, you better fess up to it or face the consequences, right? And either way, it's better to tell the truth and better to be the first to say, hey, admit it when I'm wrong. And I thought that was just I was never proud of my son. Now he had to run a lot of, but the coach actually gave the kids that actually stepped up less of a, required, punishment than those that did not admit the wrongdoing.
What I love it, Teresa. There's so many layers in that, and again, relating to your own sort of experiences with your own kids. What a beautiful example of not just taking accountability for self, right? But that leadership quality of being accountable for those around you as well, right? And being very considerate of those around you. Had nobody stepped up, what were the consequences for everyone, right? And I think that takes a lot of internal courage that's built over years. So kudos to you, Mom and Dad, for building that courage in Jeffrey. Because I think that is such a big piece of, and I want to evolve once everybody's had a chance to share into, what accountability means in the larger context of community and planet. But that is a beautiful example, Teresa. Thank you for sharing of, your son taking accountability for more than just his own actions, but, you know, for those of everyone around him too. So that's, thank you. Thank you. Sharron, Desiree, who would like to go next?
I can take a stab, unless Desiree, you'd like to go.
Thank you, Sharron.
Mute. So I've thought about this a lot, and in my mind, I've come to my own conclusion that I think as a leader, you have to have your own values. What are those values that you have fashioned and formed over the years of your deep and wide and broad experience? What are those values that you have come to set on as your own? And as leading an organization, I believe those values may not necessarily be aligned, but there has to be some alignment, I think, of some of the more important values. And so, for instance, I mean, my values that I have thought about so often are integrity, honesty, humility, and intellectual honesty, which I view as being different from just being honest. And if there's a misalignment, I believe, between what the leader's values are and the organization's values are, then I think you have problems. Accountability for me has been demonstrated several times. So in an organization where I worked once, I was pretty much asked to undermine a couple of my own staff members for the benefit of a leader who had essentially misbehaved quite poorly, in fact. And the expectation was that because I was an executive, I would protect that leader. And I didn't, because my value was being honest. My value was, one of them was integrity, that I would do what I said I would do. And that, in essence, it would be to protect my staff to the extent that they were truthful and they were honest and they were acting in accordance with whatever they needed to act with. And I thought it actually didn't take me that long to figure out that, no, I was not going to undermine my staff and I was not going to protect a liar and a poor behavior. And so I opted not to, and I paid the consequences for it. And I think about that, and really severe consequences as well, because that leader determined that they would rather have people who lied and behaved poorly, and that leader continues to behave poorly, as far as I know from accounts told to me by others. And the organization has suffered for it. It's clear, you can hear from outside the organization, from within the organization, that things aren't going very well. But I was willing to sacrifice a lot for that value that I hold very dear to my heart, and that I've decided that I'm going to live by, because every day I wake up and have to look in the mirror and have to evaluate myself, whether I'm holding myself accountable, and a leader needs to hold him or herself accountable for the values that they have articulated, again, with the hope that they're aligned in large part with those of the organization in which they lead. But I wake up every morning thinking about those values and thinking, please, dear God, let me live my values today and not let me go astray, because I do want to hold myself accountable. And that's my little story.
Thank you, Sharron. That, you know, I think that the profound component there is, you know, you can only hold yourself or others accountable against something else. And
Right.
so what is the something else, I think, is the interesting question, right? And I'd love to dive into that as we, you know, sort of evolve the conversation and expand it into community and planet, because I think that may fundamentally be the question, is what are we holding folks accountable to, right? And for what? But really good reminder. Thank you for that. And I'm glad that you were able to make a choice and maintain your strong set of values. That's, I think, admirable in anyone, as tough as the situations sometimes are.
It was very hard, and to a large, extent, I think about it every day, but I have ended up in a better place.
Yeah.
And I'm really thankful for that. Sometimes you have to go through hell in order to reach heaven.
You do. You absolutely. So true. Thank you.
But I
Desiree.
think that's one of the things that, kind of everyone expects that when you do the right thing, you'll be rewarded. Like, I'm doing the right thing. The right thing should happen now. And inevitably, that's not what happens. I mean, not everybody wants to hold that line. And quite often truth is a disruptor.
Yep.
So, I admire you very much for standing because the problem is if others stood with you, it would have been fine, but they didn't. And so the bad behavior continues. And, I think that's where we get to trouble all the time. But, I'm always admire people who are brave and, know that they're going to suffer. They'll be on the ousted out of things. They could lose their job. I had the same thing in a company I worked for. I walked in and it was a remote office, and I walked in and there was a woman in there at the desk of one of the other sales reps. And I knew what they were doing was not good. Like, I could tell that you just know, like, they're downloading stuff. The gal's going to quit. And you know what? I could have walked right back out the door. It would have been easier. I walked in there. I said, you can't be here doing that. And they said, mind your own business. And I said, okay. And I walked out and called the president of the company and said, you've got a problem down here. And so, they went off on me, and it became a big deal because they were stealing software. I mean, they were stealing a program that was developed by the company, and they were stealing. And, but the next thing I know, they knew all of my accounts, and they started going after all my accounts and bad mouthing me and trying to steal the accounts. And I remember just thinking, okay, I actually, you have that moment. I'm sitting in my car and I called my husband and I go, let me tell you, when I make this phone call, it's going to be bad, and it's probably going to come back on me. And so you and I have to both agree that we're doing this because it could affect my job and my income and everything. And he said, no, you have to do the right thing. And so, but talk about painful, and it's not just that moment, like, it lasts. Like, you run into these people, you go to conferences, there they are. They were horrible people. And, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it again. But I always warn people that, you do have a choice, and you have to be strong enough to live through the ripple effect of your choice. But I hope most people err on the side of, being accountable and doing the right thing, because that way bad behavior, it doesn't fly. And the problem is everyone's looking the other way and people are getting away with it. And so, there's no accountability. That's when we're getting our whole communities and our government and everybody in trouble. So
I think that is a critical point that you make. That is a check on whether you're holding yourself accountable. Looking back on the absolute torture and agony that one goes through, the right question you ask is, would I do it again? And the answer is definitely, without hesitation, I would do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, lots to unpack here. Sharron, I'm coming out, conversations, and Marty, we all have crazy stuff here. So thank you. Coming clean, Marty, you talked about that. Short little story. My youngest son did something that he thought I would throw the boot at him. And he was shocked that I said, oh, okay. Is everything cool? Fine. Could not handle it. And I can't disclose what it was because it was pretty monumental, I'll just say, for the privacy of him. But when it came to breaking a glass or doing something that was really, to me, very big, but petty to the real things of life, you want to say, because I'm I love my antiques and everyone knows that. And he thought because I get upset about something that you didn't tell me, it really reflects to what Teresa talked about, that communication line, keeping it open. I said, just tell me. The wrath of what you're going to get is nothing. Okay, you broke a glass, you pay for it, you do this or whatever, but tell me so I don't find out about it later. So that I just absolutely love. And Tami, you remind me when you talk about your mission. You think about your mission of karate, going through your life and going through the masters that you're doing. I know I always get it wrong, but that reminds me of patient capital, the family office space that Marty works in. If you think about the ideology of, here it is, but my legacy of what my life's going to bring, and that can be at every economic level. And that really falls into the accountability of what Sharron just shared of all these decades of being in the industry, of really beating that horse of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and making sure that my integrity stands up. And no matter how strong of relationship or impact, this is the right thing to do, and this is what has to be done. And I think that during the trying times, to where Lynn, you put down what's happened in the last couple of weeks, the wars, the resignations, the infrastructure of finance, the infrastructure of real estate, how our whole history of the last 100 years is evolving in front of our face, is community and planet driven. If you think about real estate in its entirety, this is the whole purpose of what we started the NDILC for. And so to ground it back in, the story I'll have real quick, or two real short ones. We talked about Odie, that clarity of going with it, but then Aristotle, my who's now a senior tax consultant at Deloitte, manager, he went leukemia 10 years ago. And when he went through the impact of it, that fighting of accountability to the doctors, and I had my staff left me, I had everyone in the world around me just collapsed. But the focus was to keep him alive and to keep it going at the same time with my husband. But the interesting thing that came is to the mission of the patient capital. I kept fighting the fight with him and going through it, making sure. And at the end of the day, true story, just yesterday, he came over and he says, you know what, Mom, I never thanked you for being there that entire time, at the sacrifice of my career, of things that I wanted to do, things that I wanted to, get accomplished, and the sacrifice of the rest of the family for holding it together. It was a very powerful moment. And so this whole thing of, the purpose, I find that accountability to me now has evolved into listening, because I believe that they attach accountability. It can be an execution. I mean, Sharron knows I went out and beat the pavement at the CFPB, in 2012, and said, you cannot have the right size of the only women-owned, minority-owned women business title company in the state of California. And we went and fought, and we had 7 people, the head of every department within the CFPB, come and meet us on a fly without even arranging just one, when we had Stu Ishimura there. And it was intense. So they could see what was going on, the boots on the ground, what was happening. So I really believe that accountability is listening, not only taking the action, but that action can be a something that comes back and hits you 10, 15 years later. And that evolves that mission. My mission is at all costs keep my children alive. And that involved, no matter what it had to sacrifice of myself. And was such a powerful moment, because it was like nothing was happening. Came over, helped me do some moving to rearrange my house a little bit, went out because he knew that my energy level, whatever. And when he left, he says, I wasn't planning on saying it, but I just, I never thanked you. So from the bottom of my heart, when we talk about children, sometimes we go through these ebbs and flows. And that's why I listen to you, Lynette, when we have these calls and you're talking about, even off calls, that, my 13-year-old sitting right next to her and she did this and this, and you include them in your synopsis of things. It's powerful, because my children are all older now and they're all adults, they're 20s and 30s and can be 40. And the idea is that it makes me cherish and think of the times and when they were there. And so that to me is accountable. What have I done and it leads into work. I think the combination between family and work, you can see how someone treats your children and treats their family. That's how I picked my financial advisor, to clean up all the messes and changes because of how she treated her family and not just her accolades of what she's done in her professional world. So thank you.
What a beautiful, like, again, this is mission accomplished, ladies. Thank you for sharing and, you know, helping me learn more about all of you, but also just learn as a human in terms of different perspectives around something that I think is so fundamental, right, in our society. And yet we can only ever look at things through our own experiences and frames of reference, right? Unless we have the opportunity to have that aperture widened through the experiences and the frames of reference that other people bring. And I'm grateful to all of you for sharing that. But I would like to evolve now into, you know, maybe more of an open conversation, and feel free, anybody, to pick it up. But, you know, to talk a little bit about, you know, maybe how you embody accountability in your day-to-day, whether it's your personal life or your company. And when I say how, it's not the actions that you take, it's the how you show up when you're holding others or yourself accountable. Because I think there's a big piece to this. And I've heard it through all of the stories that everyone has shared today, where there's, you know, a component of, like, you know, the value system that I'm evaluating accountability against, or the mission that I'm evaluating my accountability against. But also this notion around kind of walking the walk, right? Or walking the talk, I should say. So this is what I say it is. And am I doing, you know, both for myself and when I'm holding team or family accountable to sort of this, you know, whatever it is I'm holding up here. So I'd love to hear from you, like, how do you successfully or unsuccessfully, how do you hold accountability up in your world? And what do you think the fundamental, like, pieces are to that for it to work well?
Well, I can start with that because I know a recent situation that happened to me, and I was really fraught with a lot of, you know, real concern, you know, over what it was, and it wasn't anything that major, but it was to my world. So, you know, every year the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals request that you submit agents that qualify with, you know, that might make that NARC Top 250 list, which is a designation that a lot of our agents are very proud of holding. And I'm responsible for collecting the data and making sure that, you know, we submit the numbers to this organization. So this is just a real quick example of what happened. And so, you know, we get the data early, we collect it from all of our companies, we make sure that we cross-check it, we put it on an Excel sheet, and actually one of my team members helps me with the data. And last year, it was a tough time. I had surgery on my foot. Y'all have all heard about my foot surgery. And so I was in surgery when the data was required to be turned in. So the day that it was submitted, I approved the submission. So I was just like in the midst of dealing with my own personal issues, and I really didn't pay attention. It was my fault because the person that submitted it on my behalf was doing so, but I really had to do that final check. And upon the day that the NARA Top 250 information was sent, a whole company was left out of that submission. And this company had a lot of agents that had made that list consistently and who are very honored to be part of it for the last 10 years since the inception of the list. And I went back and rechecked and looked and realized that when the Excel sheet was submitted, we had compiled it and separate by companies, but then when it was submitted to NARP, it was just put on one full sheet, and we had accidentally left off that company. So literally, it was my fault that company was not on the list, and there was about 20 agents that were not going to make the list. Now, I know this all sounds menial, but it's extremely important. So I called NARA to see if they could help me in any way, and they couldn't because they have requirements and they're restricted as to what they are allowed to do. And they say the deadline is this deadline, and we did not meet the deadline. So I had to call the company and let them know, I'm so sorry. It's not accidental. It's my fault. I did not send your company to the, and here's what we can do because NARP cannot add them. Okay. And so what are some solutions? And I said, and I will personally call every one of your agents that is off this list to let them know it was not your fault, that it was my oversight. And I did that. It was the hardest call I had to do. And I even called our CEO and said, if I need to step down for this, I will absolutely do it. I totally understand that this is a big deal for a lot of our agents because it's it's a credibility factor. And every single agent was like, Teresa, it's okay. All right. We just wanted to know like why we're not on the list, but it's all right. It's not the end of, it's just a nice thing to have. But in the end, I realized that doing that really, I was willing to do whatever I needed to do, although I didn't want to, but I realized it was my fault. It wasn't anyone else's fault, but my own. And I had to just fess up to it and let everyone know and just face those consequences in whatever way I needed to face them and not blame others for it. Because in the end, it was me. It was me that did not check the list to make sure that all the names were on there. And believe me, that is something that it won't happen again.
Ever do again, right?
It will not happen again. But that's just
isn't that
example of something.
Yeah, isn't that the greatest thing about accountability though? It's like such a great learning lesson for those that are open to, whether you're being held accountable or holding yourself accountable, is there's always a growth opportunity in it, right? And I think there's a number of you've said already on, in the conversation that, this is about growth, right? And we are human, we are always going to make mistakes. One of the things that I learned that, your story reminds me of, Teresa, is, I grew up on a farm and like was always the tough chick, right? And I always had to prove myself. And so like you could never show weakness and you could never be wrong. And like you always had to like be better and excel. And personally, that's a little bit of my drive as well, a little type A personality. I will tell you, in my leadership, the biggest fundamental shift for all of the hard work that I had put in for years before was when I introduced humility. And humility, and this is what your story reminds me of, like, grace for myself that I'm going to screw up. I just about dropped an F-bomb. My apologies to those people that are listening live.
Okay.
That is the farm girl in me. But, when you show up with grace and humility, first and foremost for yourself, and then are able to demonstrate it to others, right? Often we make up the story in our own head. Like if I admit that I screwed up, or if I tell other people that it's okay that they've messed up, right? There's some evidence of weakness there. But honestly, it was the biggest fundamental shift that, and your story just reminds me of that, Teresa, that I noticed is when I could just show up and go like, look, guys, I screwed this up majorly. And like, I'm going to own this. Like collectively, we're going to have to wear this a little bit, but this is on me. And what can we do? People rally faster, harder, you gain more respect. The needle moves collectively. And it's like I'm getting goosebumps because I'm sure we've all had those experiences. But, for me, that for an accountability piece was, first of all, where do I start with grace, right? And I'm not suggesting that you always have to, feel this feeling of humility, but like, where do I first of all start with an understanding approach in this whole process of holding myself or others accountable, right? And so thank you for sharing that, Teresa, because it's so fundamental to me. I'm curious of others, like, have you had similar experiences, or are there sort of pivotal moments in your worlds where you've really noticed things leveling up, by sort of taking a different approach or applying a different lens?
Can I say something to Teresa's story, which I found extraordinarily
Please.
moving, is that for me personally, when that has happened, and that has happened because as human beings, we make mistakes. And if you're going to be humble, and if you are going to be open and transparent, then you do what Teresa did. And I don't know about you, but I felt it was cathartic to actually do what you did, to call every single agent and give them the opportunity to react. And the reaction was exactly what one would have hoped. Oh, it's no big deal. Everyone makes mistakes. Had you not done that, it would have resulted in a very different ending, I'm sure. You'd have had 20 angry agents who would have accused you and your organization of not being honest, of not being good. But you handled it in such a way that they felt relieved.
They were so
They,
kind. I'm going to tell y'all, it was probably one of the
No.
they were so kind, and
yes,
our leaders, they were just so kind about it. Like, hey, Teresa, it's okay. And I wasn't trying to be humble, or I was just like, oh my God, I was the president of NARA and I messed this up. I mean, how is it that possible that I do that? And so I'm really honestly sharing that because number one, I was really nervous about even calling people, but at the same time, I realized how important it was to do it myself and not to let others do it. I said, no, this is on me. I've got to call every agent, let them know. And you're right. It just makes such an impact because the results were very different from what I thought it was going to be. I thought they were going to be so mad, leave the company, and they were all so understanding.
Showed you were human,
You know,
Teresa. God forbid. I'm sorry.
You know, I think every one of us is a human becoming, right? We're not really even necessarily being, we're a human becoming, and we're becoming who we are. And I think that we all have to own it at some point in time. We've all had moments when we've really had to own it, and finding out that people really appreciate you being human and having humility and being willing to apologize. And if you ignored it and just tried to slide over it and avoid it, it literally would be like a cut that turns into a staph infection, that turns into something having to be removed. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Whenever there's a void, negativity fills the void. So kudos to you. I think that was really terrific. I just wanted to bring up this book just because a lot of our resistance is from ourselves, right? Sometimes things get really tough, and it's tough to stick with that commitment. It could be exhaustion, mental, physical, emotional, doesn't matter where it is, that it could be just exhaustion, or you're overwhelmed, or you overcommitted because you thought that this was going to be so much easier than it was going to be. But a commitment's a commitment, right? And there's this great book, and it's tiny. It's a real small book, so it's really easy to read because I know not everybody is a readaholic like me. But it's called Do the Work. And so much of it is about your own resistance to yourself, your own resistance to being willing to do stuff. You have, voices that are talking inside of you, sometimes trying to push you in a different direction, whether that's temptation or just because it just seems too hard today. And it's just a great book to really help you to self-realize. I think every one of us wants to be part of something better, right? Harvard Business did a study, it was even in USA, that people want to be part of something better when they go to work. They honestly want to be part of something that's better, and better is making people transparent and making people accountable so that they can see, oh my gosh, they made a mistake too, I'm going to be okay, right? It's going to make them even more willing to do it. And I think the same with our community and whatever we've made commitments to, whether that's the environment or our community, all of us want to be part of something better. Now we really need to look and hone in on where's the best place that I can contribute, that I can be accountable because I'm going to stick with it. Don't join the popular club if that's not the club that you really have an interest in and can deliver passion to. Join the one that you know that you're going to be able to follow up and follow through all the way. And helping people to stick with it and be accountable. I find that if you know what you want, why you want it, how bad you want it usually tells you you're in the right lane. But more important than anything is who benefits if I succeed. Who benefits if we succeed? I think that the whole NDILC, we're doing this because we know this is going to benefit a lot more people, and that we get to pay it forward and bring up more leaders and make things more fair and equitable for everybody. And that's why everyone here is willing to contribute their time and put the effort in. But when you can really remind yourself, when you've overcommitted, who benefits if I succeed, a lot of times you can stick with it more for that than for anything else.
I love that, Tami. How do we foster that more we're likely all doing that in our microcosms, right? How do we foster that, as those concentric circles evolve away from our core, from our families, from our work? How do we continue to foster that in community or planet or larger economy or,
I think that you ask yourself effective questions on a regular basis. In what way can I contribute? And if we focus on the solution and not on the problem, if we focus on the solution, we'll find a solution, right? These two groups that are part of the University of Maine. Just blows my mind. These two groups that are part of the University of Maine, engineers, and on the other side, the whole entire art department, right? Graphics and everything artsy. So the engineers, right, that when you ask them what time it is, they tell you how the watch was built. And when you're talking to the art side, they're, what time is it? They're saying, who cares? And they would always be fighting against each other. And somebody at the university decided to take them on a field trip, and they took them and they went to a homeless encampment. They went to a homeless shelter. They went to a homeless area that was completely veterans. And when they came back, they decided that they found that they had a collective cause, right? So now they're brainstorming and collaborating together. What can we do to make a difference? How can we make something that's going to make a big difference? And longest story short, they have the largest 3D printer in the world, and they created a completely sustainable, talk about being responsible for the environment, a completely sustainable 12-unit housing for veterans. By just asking the right effective questions and collaborating together instead of separating out. So when you look at a lack that's in your community or in your company or in the world, what way can I make a contribution and focus on where I can fit in for the solution? No one's ever going to ask me to fix their computer because it's not a gift I have, right? I'm just going to buy another computer and donate that one to another school, right? So it's finding out where those lanes are for yourself and really making that commitment that you're going to be able to stick with it. And, you know, I'm so moved when I see something like that story, and we just turned it around. So I think if we spent a lot more time talking about the solution and focusing on the solution instead of catastrophizing over all the things that are happening and all the things that are out there that are going on, I think we would come up with a lot more solutions, and we would be, our headspace would definitely be in a much better place.
Tami,
Sure.
My soapbox then.
if I may. I actually have to go, but I wanted to just contribute this last bit, if I may. Tami, you hit upon a word that you kind of sort of glossed over, but I think is really critical, is community. And if you are a community, then I think it has to be a very deliberate, intentional definition of your community so that people understand what are the common goals here? What are we trying to achieve? And that you're collectively doing what it is that the group agrees is going to be done, right? And the leader, and I've always told my staff members, I'm in this for a purely selfish reason, because I want to look good. If you look good, I look good. So I need all of you to succeed as a community so that we all look good, right? Our bonuses will be bigger, and, you know, we'll get all the accolades. And that's all I have to say today. I have to go, but I have an appointment that I can't miss. But thank you.
Thank you, Sharron.
Thank you very much, Sharron, for sharing. Unbelievable. Stay safe. So, you know, one of the things about, and Sharron knows my story about, you know, you talk about accountability and impact. You know, it's been now little over 11 years that when I had over $500,000 that had gone through to where I had unsigned checks, forgery checks, and people just, the banking industry just dealing the accountability and not watching my accounts. And so when you think about that impact, you know, here I'm, you know, I sit as an entrepreneur, I sit on all these different boards, you know, I help advise for the SBA all the way down the system. And I had to come clean on my own demise of what I had gone through, right? And at the same time, I, like Teresa, I had the story to where, you know, I had a personal issue. You know, you heard about my son with leukemia. My husband was in one hospital. I had a reaction to endomycin, and then here's my others. And one of our 4 sons was in City of Hope because he had leukemia. So having that, and then having all this banking going, and have the whole staff quit and everything, I was going through my whole world upside down. I had to come to grips to say, it's okay to show your vulnerability. But what happened is that my human side has got me better and stronger, not only in my mind, but also to show that I am human to everyone else, that we all make mistakes, we can all grow. So it's not about, hey, she made a mistake, I can do it. It's the idea that just because you might have, people might think you have everything going for you, there are a lot of things behind the veil that people don't know about you that's going on. And, you know, you can't, the old adage, to reference back to books like Tami as, is you can't judge a book by its cover. And the reality that we're seeing right now, and you look at the You know, we started off with this last couple of weeks of the implosion of the real estate community with everything that's going on. And you think about the wars that are going on, that's real estate. You think about the environment of technology in real estate, the leadership in real estate. So the bad actors, the organizational side, the infrastructure, the uproar of the consumer. There's so much that's going on. And so the idea is to, back to Tami's point, have your mission, have your passion, but at the same time, show up that it's sometimes showing up as not a visual thing that you see. Sometimes that showing up and being accountable takes times to manifest itself behind the scenes, because you have to have, Lynette, the infrastructure of the technology piece behind, or the backbone of the infrastructure, make it work. And I know that we all work on that in our own way, in our own contributions. And when it comes together, it really is magical. And that's where this whole ecosystem comes in, where how can we be sustainable for ourselves, for the planet, and the world we live in?
I love that, Desiree. And I come back to, Tami's, and thank you so much, Tami, because so much gold in what you shared. But what really resonated highly with me is ask the right questions. And, I think by asking questions, it always gives us an opportunity to view things slightly differently. And we might learn things that it again expands our aperture, right? And so last question I'd love to pose is, we've heard so many great stories, and, I think this group, by probably the nature of the group, has a high standard to which we hold ourselves and our organizations and our communities accountable. But I'm a big believer that there's always opportunity for improvement, right? And I think through that lens of asking those right questions, asking really good questions, we can often get there. So the last question I have for all of you is, where are opportunities? Do you see opportunities where either individually or as a society or community, we can be even better, right? Because I think there are really great examples of where accountability is showing up. But as we're evolving through all of the turmoil, right, which there always will be, how do we continue to do even better or encourage even better from those around us?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is really being as personal as you possibly can. If I was talking about each individual, when you can catch somebody doing something good, people become what we tell them they can be. And so now they start to realize that they can be more, and they can do more, and they can accomplish more. I think that recognizing some talent in others, so you're encouraging more people to rise up, I think that really does make a big difference. And I think in order for it to really be meaningful, you have to be as specific as humanly possible, right? It has to be something that's so specific that they really feel like they're valued. There's a cruise line, and they have the happiest employees that have lasted the longest of any cruise line. And when asked what the reason was for why they were so loyal and why they were putting in all the extra effort, they said that their immediate supervisors and the supervisors above them always complimented them and were very specific about what it is that they did and what it is that they accomplished that they saw in that person. And I think we can do that in our communities everywhere. It doesn't matter. Somebody doing a great job that just rang up your groceries, or somebody that just took that extra minute to make sure that you're okay, or somebody, it could be a competitor, but you notice them doing something really good. Pam O'Connor wrote a great article in LinkedIn in regard to the real estate industry. And I wrote her a message. I messaged her back and said, I just love how well thought out it was, how well she constructed what she did. And I think that mutual admiration and respect will just keep raising everybody up instead of
Rising tides.
Yeah, instead of being competitive by nature, we can bring everybody up at the same time. It doesn't take anything away from me to add love or value to you. And I think that just being more specific about it, I think that we could make a difference that way.
Love that. Thank you, Tami. Marty, any thoughts?
I think you just nailed it. I think it's, accountability comes down to, I always say it's what you're doing when no one's looking.
Yeah.
That's always the true measure of people, that, that they are what they're doing behind the walls, in front of the walls, and I think that when the culture that we've been through, I think that's what's rocked me the most, is that sometimes I don't understand. Like, I thought we all agreed on certain accountability things, and it feels like we don't. And so I think that's where it becomes hard, that you kind of have to, we do have to find our people that we'll stand with, so we can stand strong. My husband's been in a Bible study with these men at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning for 15 years. And they hold each other accountable. I mean, if one of them's kind of going sideways on something, they call them out and say, no, that's not okay, and those are true friendships that, are important to, to hold us all accountable. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know either. Like, you don't know you're stepping in it sometimes, so we've all been on a learning curve to be of respect and understanding with DEI on the table. That's a learning curve for a lot of us. Like, language that we've used that is offensive, being unaware. Well, let's be aware, it's like, those are all accountability things. I think when you look back, you think of how much change has happened in a pretty short amount of time, which is some of this upheaval, because people don't like change, but it feels like we're going in the right direction. We started the conversation before the recording where we were saying we're watching people that have the jobs in DEI at these companies, they start eliminating those jobs. It's like, okay, so that means we got to hold each other accountable. If you're not going to have someone at the top watching, it's on us to make sure that that wasn't a shiny object that went by that everybody thought was the cool thing to talk about for a while. No, we know better now. And we have to hold everyone accountable. If we're not going to invest, if companies aren't going to invest in keeping that at the top level, that's on all of us now.
The opportunity that you talked about to close it out, Lynette, is that, the space that you're in with Second Century Ventures and Reach Canada and the 6 other Reach elements that are out there around the world, the opportunity to make an impact and change the landscape, and no matter what area it is that with change comes great opportunity. And I think that we have to, as entrepreneurs, as those who are leading these major companies or organizations or infrastructure, or having a Bible study like your husband has, Marty, is keeping people accountable to not lose and have all this noise. You've got so much media. We're trying to make the news as it's happening in real time. And we have to take that pause to say, when is it too much? When is it overwhelming? When do we have to take that pause to smell the roses, right? And that opportunity to make an impact in growth is absolutely phenomenal, to find people who can, look at Africa now, 75% of the people now actually have a cell phone. They never had access. You can imagine the scalability in Africa with some of these technology impacts and what they can do to change so much dynamic and growth and opportunity scale business-wise. So I look at, as we move forward, this is the time to put your thinking cap on. Be a critical thinker that we talked about a couple months ago, and be the best you can for our future.
Can
I
have to be on
recommendation
right
of a
now,
book?
so I gotta bug
Go
out.
for it. We're
Great
at
to see you guys.
Go,
Because I never do books, but Tami, I love the one you recommended, so I'm definitely going to read that, because that looked like a short one, and that's Who Moved My Cheese. I love that book.
Yeah.
So I can
Yes,
reread
it's
that
such a
one,
good book.
because that one will help us. Okay, how can we come up with those solutions, especially right now, that'll help our industry? So awesome.
Love it. Thank you all. I really, really appreciate the digging in the dialogue. I, again, learned so much. I have a bunch of notes that I've taken here. And thank you for the book recommendation, Tami. I'm all about the books. So I have a list ongoing constantly. So really appreciate it. And thank you all. Thank you for being accountable and, being here and giving back to the community.
Thank you,
Back
for
to you.
hosting. December 5th will be our next one. So, and it's Vanessa Matanaj will be here to host that one. So again, build equity. So, I mean, build equality, empower women every day to achieve an equal playing field. So goes on with our D&I to go with it. So please stay safe, stay healthy. And thank you all for all the listeners. And thank you for all your greatness and being on the council. All right. Take care, y'all.
Have a wonderful
Have a
night.
great
Bye-bye.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.